Hi Janeites, and welcome back to the What the Austen podcast. I am joined again by Sophie Andrews, also known as Laughing with Lizzie. We're doing basically like a sister episode to the one we did last year that was on about the lessons we'd learnt from Jane Austen heroines. So this time we're going to be covering the men in Austen's novels, the lessons we've learnt from them being obviously their pros, but also, you know, from their like failings or their weaknesses, because there's lots to be taken from people's weaknesses and their failings in life. I feel that about myself as well. I don't know about you, Sophie.
Oh yes, definitely. And the heroes definitely have plenty of failings and weaknesses to look at.
Nobody's perfect. We love them, flaws and all.
No, we can't. I mean, no, nobody's perfect. Even Mr. Knightley, not quite perfect either.
Our knight in shining armour is still not perfect. So that's a good place to start, right? We can definitely start with Mr. Knightley.
Oh,
okay.
Bless him. He is lovely.
Go on.
He is lovely. I think he's quite I think of all of the heroes, he is maybe the one that he gets sort of portrayed as the most like perfect, and the one that sort of doesn't like change and have as much as like a character like development and things. I think it as always ends up being mostly focused around Emma. But I think it's not. I think he definitely does, go through some changes throughout the novel, and I think just in the way that he comes to recognize his own feelings, and how he deals with that, and sort of, I suppose, that switch with Emma, and sort of just watching him try and adjust to that.
Yeah. Definitely not easy, you know, navigating, changing from being friends into something more, choosing to do that in the first place.
And when you've known someone for so long, and as you said, we kind of can see from him that, hey, sometimes men struggle to show their love. If I loved you less, forgotten that quote apparently. If I loved you less, I might
be able to talk about it more.
Thank you. I'm still on antibiotics, getting over illnesses. That's my excuse. That quote. Yeah. It shows that it, is a struggle for him. I think for me, the biggest takeaway from Knightley would have to be that kind of like, don't be afraid to call out your friends when they do something wrong. Like, I think there's always that whole sort of narrative throughout Emma that Knightley's always, scolding her and telling her off. But I think for most of it, it's kind of like playful, nothing really serious. Just, she's always like, oh, in the way an older brother would scold me. But the whole Miss Bates debacle, like, that's a whole different level, and it's a whole different feeling to it. And you can see and feel the pain in Knightley that he does have to berate her so strongly on that. And I think it's, especially by that point in the novel, that he knows how deeply he loves her. So it must be even harder to be like, Emma, what was that? What are you doing? Badly done. And I think, but like, good on him for still doing it. And I think that's, an important lesson, because it can be really hard if you watch a really close friend or even a loved one do something that is wrong. It's so hard to be like, that won't.
Not showing up as your best elf friend.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah. Honestly, that makes me think so much, in Harry Potter, where Neville gets like rewarded for the fact that he was able to stand up to his friends. Yeah, and it's like, it's challenging to stand up to just someone in general, but to stand up to your friends sometimes when you see them doing something, it's so much harder. 100%. And again, like, I think in so many ways, Knightley risks the friendship in multiple occasions because he loves Emma. Like, he risks it in scolding her and like saying to her, I don't like the way that you're showing up, and I'm willing to tell you, even if that means that like we can't chat anymore. But also he's like, I'll tell you my feelings even if it's not going to go anywhere, even if that risks the friendship as well. I love that he will speak his mind because he loves her enough that actually her showing up as her best self and him showing up as his best self like kind of trumps it all.
I think, it kind of gives you that, encouragement of, find yourself a partner who challenges you to be the best you, as well as loves you for who you are. But I think you need to have you need both of those things.
Yeah, I love something earlier that you said as well about how Knightley's always kind of true to himself. He doesn't change as much as some of the other heroes. And I think that is so true. Something that I actually really like about him is he is quite an open book. I think he closes off more when he starts to realize his feelings for Emma, but he is who he is and he's proud of that. Like even in his proposal to Emma, he says, you know what I am, and that's so true. Everybody in the community does, right? And that's why people can rely on him, because he's dependable. And I just think that's such a good quality.
He's the complete opposite of Frank Churchill, who comes to Highbury pretending to be someone he isn't and having lots of secrets and being completely duplicitous. So I think it's a real stark contrast to Knightley, who is, as you say, not. It's just a real stability, I think, to everyone around him, and everyone admires him and looks up to him, and he's true to himself. And I think Emma appreciates that as well, because I don't think Emma would like a man who was
up to her.
And was, complimenting her all the time and all of this, like Mr. Elton. Like, she can't, but as soon as it's like, oh wait, you're after me. Oh no, absolutely not.
I know.
So I think Emma appreciates that as well. And needs it at times.
Yeah, I think I'd appreciate that too. I think I can't think of anything worse than someone always kissing up to me and never challenging me, never pointing out where I've gone wrong. No. I'd rather someone say it come from a place of love, not to just be like, you're a terrible person. But love. But if I did something that wasn't my best self, I'd like to think someone who loved me would point that out to me and be like, look, like I wasn't going to say this publicly, but now we're in private. Like, just want to say, don't think you showed up as your best self there. And I could be like, oof, that hurt, but also thank you.
It's going to hurt, but you're going to, going to be like, okay, that was a little bit dickish. No, that wasn't great. But which is what Knightley does. Again, he doesn't do it in public. He just does it when Emma's on her own. So it does come from love and just him knowing that that's not really Emma, which it wasn't really, because it was under the kind of influence of Frank Churchill. I'm not saying Emma's blameless. She's not. However, Frank Churchill was an absolute nightmare on that picnic. So.
I know, and we all get carried away sometimes, right? Especially if we're around people that just aren't great influences on us in general. So I do kind of get, why it happens. And I get why it hurts Knightley as well, because he doesn't want to see her behaving in that way. Something else that I want to touch on that I love about Mr. Knightley, a word that comes up a lot when I talk about him in the episodes, is stewardship. The fact that he's such a steward of the natural world and like his area and also the community. Like he takes such care when it comes to Highbury and like considering everything, and even like just like where roads will go. And he's like kind of like on a parish council where he talks about like ways that they can improve things. And I love that he's a leader, but he's not so he's not a dictator in it, he's a leader, but he's very happy still being in the background. He can lead without being in the spotlight, and I think that's a great quality.
I mean, he clearly takes a huge interest in all of his like tenant farmers and everything, of like Robert Martin and everything, and that's always important as a master and someone who has like a lot of power in the area, which he does, but it's never abused. I think in the same way that we see that in Darcy as well, which we find out later. But I think that is how your servants and people lower than you feel about that a person is I think it's going to be a very accurate reflection of how that person is. which I think is why it's always interesting when we see kind of situations like that where you see him being, you know, good, nice to Robert Martin and helping out with X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, definitely. I love that he's not kind of snobbish in his view of social classes. Like, he actually values people based on what they, you know, just who they are. Like, even Miss Bates, who obviously for all intents and purposes is a bit of a slight joke in the community, I suppose, but you know, he still shows up for her, he still supports her, he still helps her.
And he knows what's due to her. He knows that even though, and which is what he reminds Emma of, and it's, I think he could act like a Lady Catherine about people like that, but he doesn't. And he, you know, and even like he acknowledges, like at one point about Miss Smith, even, you know, and he basically says how, you know, Miss Smith is better than Mrs. Elton, and that Emma chose better for Mr. Elton than he chose for himself. So he acknowledges that although she is someone of, you know, no consequence and no idea what her, you know, heritage and sort of birth situation is at the time, acknowledges that she's a nice person.
Yeah, and the same with like Robert Martin and William Larkin, like you were saying, like he says to Emma at the end, you know, if I could change their situation in life, I would, because he just looks beyond kind of what society has given people, and he considers more who that person actually is. And like, you know, if they're true of heart, like he'll always show up in a good way to them, and he just uses his influence for such good, and I just think that's like an amazing quality, and I think that's why we all love him, right? Because he's just a decent human.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we can't not comment on his patience as well, not only with people like Miss Bates and everyone, but like Mr. Woodhouse, like he's there all the time, and man, you must have patience to be around Mr. Woodhouse all the time. And he's so gracious, and he just doesn't think twice about it. And I mean, even going so far, and obviously at the end, is saying he'll remove from Donwell to Emma's house. I mean, like, that would be huge now. Like, if, you know, I don't think I could name many men that would be happy to move in with their in-laws, you know, even temporarily. Whereas, but back, you know, 200 years ago, like that's huge. And he has no qualms. He's like, yeah, we'll do that. That will, you know, if that means I can be with you and we can get married and everything, then we'll just do that. I mean, you can argue that he's there all the time anyway, so it's not much different.
Yeah, it's not too much of a change. But he gives up his independence, right?
Yeah.
And that's massive.
Yeah, and you know, he's in that big, you know, Donwell on his own, but still to like literally remove from it and, you know, close it up and whatever. Yeah, it's such a I think like I don't know, humble, is that the word?
It humbles me as a reader. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, I always
setting high standards for men.
He is. I always love that bit, and like I do love it in the 2009 mini-series when they do that scene and she sort of runs in crying like, I love you, we can never be together, and then he comes out and just the way that he's like, I've been thinking about it and I'll just move with him, and she's like, you do that for me, and it's just so funny.
I know. I love that scene. Oh, you know, I love that one. That's my favorite adaptation.
A good one. And I just think,
I'll praise about that.
Yeah, and he says, you know, I would do a lot more without a second thought, which I know is in that rather than the book. However, I think that does sum up that, yeah, it's not a big deal for him, which is just so nice.
Yeah, he's so people first, and I love that. I think something I was trying to put that a flaw as well, just to balance him out, you know, had to find a flaw. The one that I picked up on is the way that he kind of closes down when he's jealous.
Frank Churchill.
Totally unnecessary, but the whole Frank Churchill situation, the scene that stands out to me is, do you know when he's dropped off like meats and apples for the Bateses? In the pianofortes then, Emma, Frank Churchill, everyone's around, and Mr. Knightley's outside, and they're like, come in, Mr. Knightley, and he finds out that Frank and Emma are both there together, and he's like, no, I need to go. And it's a really funny scene, but it just really points out how much he he really just like closes off quite a lot when he starts to feel jealous and upset about the whole Frank situation.
I mean,
I can't blame it, but I'm also
no.
like,
Yeah, there is distinct jealousy there. But I mean, you can argue as well, though, that obviously it's sort of, he has an inkling that there's something else going on that we're not being told about, and kind of tries to hint at this to Emma, like, what I feel like there's more of an acquaintance between Jane Fairfax and Frank than they're letting on, and she's sort of like, no, I don't know what you're talking about, you don't know anything about these things. So I imagine sort of seeing Emma just so sort of blindly going along with it and sort of being led by him, when you've got a suspicion, even if he also probably knows, hey, there's probably a bit of jealousy going on, must be difficult. And then seeing her act in a way that he knows isn't like appropriate, and just isn't really truly Emma, and it's because of Frank Churchill being around, must be difficult. So yeah, I'm now defending the floor, but
he's jealous, we understand, it's okay.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I think saying that anybody can avoid jealousy is just unrealistic. I think it is just human nature to feel jealousy. My only thing with it is I'm like, he would save himself so much time and energy if he just asked Emma if she was interested in Frank, because she would just be like,
not.
no.
I know, but I mean, that will be the same with so many heroes. If they had just said something, then they would save themselves a lot of like heartache and guessing what's going on inside heroines' minds. So yeah,
That's
and I mean
so
that
true.
definitely applies to us as well. How many times you're like, oh, if I'd said something like 3 weeks ago, I would have been better now. Even between like friends, you sort
I
of,
know.
I think that's just a very human nature. We
I
like
love
to not
reading
do
in
that,
like
and then just work out scenarios in our head of that's what it means. No,
play
that's
out.
what it means.
Yeah, have the whole that. Yeah, exactly. I love reading and listening to stuff by Eckhart Tolle, and he often says that if you leave like this time gap between those things, then that's what happens. You get so stuck in your mind about it. But he's like, the best thing you can do is just address it as soon as it comes up for you. And that'll just like saves like so much, like you'll create so much more peace in your life. But yeah, nobody ever does this.
No.
So much miscommunication happens, and like you just create a whole scenario in your head. I know. Is that everything you wanted to say on Mr. Knightley then?
Yeah, that probably covers him pretty well.
We started with a good one. It's all downhill from here. No, I'm just...
What are you saying about my Darcy? How dare you?
Joking.
I mean, he has loads of flaws, I grant him, but
he has loads of flaws, but he's accountable to them. We love that. We love that in a man.
Yeah, exactly. He admits the flaws.
I'm not letting you go to him yet, though.
No, that's fine.
The next one on my list is Henry Tilney. So I don't know if you want to. Do you want to start off with your thoughts on him?
We love Henry Tilney. He's so brilliant. He's so different from the other heroes. I think in a way he's kind of feminine, like, but in a good way. Like the fact that he'll talk about muslin, and he's got a really beautiful relationship with his sister. And when we see his relationship with Catherine, which starts out, really he's quite teasing of her at the start, and I think he's finding her really quite sweetly naive and finding it all quite amusing, but then gets caught up in his own feelings. But I think you need to get you a man who can smirk but also be rational.
Yes. Oh my god. Yes, he's so like, he just has fun, doesn't he? That's what I kind of thought. I thought he lets loose and has fun. He doesn't take things too seriously. And I kind of love that about him. Like, I always say Northanger Abbey is such an easy romance compared to some of the others, because there is just no guessing games or confusion when it comes to Henry Tilney. And what an absolute, like, that's just gold dust. I mean, who wouldn't want, an easy situation where it's like, there's no guessing, there's no games. You like me, I like you, easy life. I love that.
Like, we need that in life. You need that in life. That would make everything so much easier. I think, Yeah, he is brilliant. And I think, well, I suppose I when I asked about this on my stories about what other people had learned, someone said nerdy guys are the best. And I haven't really thought of Henry Tilney as like a nerdy guy, but in a way, yeah, I get where that's coming from, because he talks about like reading all these novels, and which obviously, men shouldn't be reading novels. Oh, no. And I think, yeah, in a way I can see that kind of description of him, and yeah, he is great. And I think he having that the banter that he has essentially with Catherine, I think that is lovely to see, and you don't see that in quite the same way with any of the other couples. And I think that is his sense of humor, and his sort of love for life, and just his attitude towards everything. And it's not that he can't be serious, obviously he can, and he's got plenty of demons, i.e. his father and his brother. But
The male figures in his life.
Yeah, but he's going through life in the best way that he can, making the best of everything. And I suppose in a similar way to Knightley, I'd say he's quite an open book as well. Sort of in what you were
I
saying,
love
that
that.
their relationship is quite simple. I think, yeah, it is, because he doesn't really hide what he's feeling. And so in that sense, he's quite an open book as well.
Something that I throw at you then, just because of some of the points you said, do you think this is because he's not the firstborn? Like, if you think about people like Darcy and Knightley, they carry such a burden because they literally got estates to manage.
Yeah.
They've got employees, they've got people in their community who who need to
So
be
many
looked
people
out
that
for.
rely on them, as well as like a name and a reputation of the family that they need to
Right.
upkeep. Definitely, I think there's a lot that falls on the firstborn, and I think Henry is probably pretty glad that he's not, and that therefore he just is more free. I think you see that in, we see that a little bit of Edward Ferrars. Like, look at his brother Robert Ferrars. He doesn't he doesn't care, does he? And you can even go forward to like modern ones like Bridgerton. Like I loved Anthony Bridgerton's story, because that really sort of plays heavy on that whole idea of the pressure and the expectations of the firstborn compared to the other brothers that can just faff around if they want to, really.
Yeah.
So I think in a way, yeah, that definitely can come into it, and just that he doesn't have as much to deal with. You not that his brother exactly is the perfect elder brother in regards to his responsibilities and everything. However, but maybe it was all too much for him, and that's why he went that way.
It's a true story. It is a true story.
Bertram as well, Edmund, because Tom's obviously the elder, and he's not dealing with it well either. Even when
Even Edmund, though, Edmund's like such a crisis. It's like, I know you've got responsibilities, friend, but you chill out a little bit, like.
Yeah,
constant crisis.
But like I think you see Tom trying to deal with being the eldest, and seeing that, especially when he goes off to Antigua and everything, and like the realities of essentially where his father's money is coming from, and sort of where his money is coming from as well. And you can kind of see the battle with Tom.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting if their fathers are still alive, how much more chaotic the life. If the fathers are still alive, how much more chaotic the firstborns are, because they just seem to be like just crazy.
Yeah.
Whereas when the fathers are dead, then it's like, I've got to step up, I've got to take responsibility.
They've gone through that crazy period, and they've had to like, right, I'm in charge now. So yeah, no, it's so true. And I think it's probably was just accurate of the time, but also possibly Jane Austen putting a bit of like commentary in on there on sort of firstborn versus secondborn.
Yeah, I think so. Something that I love about Henry as well, though, is that he above anyone else chooses love over money, which is usually the protagonist choice, right? She usually picks that she's like, I want to marry for love. Doesn't matter how much money you've got, I'm going to marry for love. But something I love about Henry is he's willing to go disinherited so that he can marry Catherine. And
I mean, that's
I kind of love that.
huge, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, to go against, to go against your family now can be hard. But again, to go against your family 200 years ago, against your very evil, horrible father, and, you know, facing disinheritance, it is an admirable quality. And I think you can't not be flattered if you're in Catherine's shoes, even if you're a bit like, oh, no money. But I think you have to be a bit flattered that he's got his priorities right. He's putting you first.
Yeah, definitely. I also like as well when he comes back, he's very quick to accept where he was wrong, but also like he doesn't go to Catherine like, oh, you like reiterates all the ways in which, you know, she was mistaken and everything. He's like, you were wrong, but there was truth in what you assumed. Like he was like, there was actually some truth here. Like I kind of overreacted because in reality, yes, like, you know, my father was horrible to my mum, even murderer, but
Yeah.
but he wasn't so nice to her.
And he also kind of acknowledges that he probably was a little bit encouraging the idea in a way, sort of the whole like gothic, oh yeah, it's all spooky and all this, and so he realised he was probably a little bit to blame for her getting quite so carried away as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I suppose
like he knows her personality, right? He knows that she's quite gullible and can like get drawn into this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose you sort of say like it's admirable that he, you know, goes against his father, risks disinheritance. I mean, I suppose you can say the same about Edward Ferrars because he sticks by Lucy. Although for him, you kind of say he probably shouldn't have, because he kind of his loyalty was perhaps misplaced in that, you know, he knew that it was a relationship that was too quick and, you know, he shouldn't have committed. They were all young and everything. And obviously it backfires anyway because she's like, oh, okay, I'm going to move to your brother then because he's got the money.
Crazy plot twist.
I know. And then they don't disinherit the brother. Talk about unfairness. Never understood that. I'm like, all right, favoritism much. Anyway,
I know.
So I think it's an interesting, I suppose, juxtaposition of, you know, they are both loyal, which you have to admire. It's just, oh well, I suppose it's Catherine versus Lucy, isn't it? So
yeah. Also, the weird thing about Edward as well, because I did a lot of reading up on proposals for an episode that I did, and women could get out of engagements pretty easily if they wanted to, but for men it was like hella difficult. Like you just couldn't, like once you proposed to someone, you couldn't then go back and be like, oops, changed my mind. Like it was like hella impossible. Like as opposed to a woman who could just be like, I don't want to marry you anymore.
Yeah. Well, Jane
even
Austen
though that can look
did that.
bad, but yeah, exactly. Jane Austen herself did it. It was definitely easier for women to get out of engagements.
It's that whole idea of, you know, being bound in your and sort of reputation. Sort of, you would destroy a woman's reputation, but that must be so hard though. So
as if you engaged to Lucy. Oh my god.
Yeah. I think there's got to be a way out.
Yeah. Also, Edward's, I always say this, but he's not much of a man of action, is he? I mean, we'll get on to him, but
we'll get on to him.
You know, if there was a loophole, he's not the one searching for it, that's for sure.
Not really, no. But yeah, no, Tilney's great. And I think, as well as, a man who knows how to have fun, if he understands muslin and clothing, more the better. Because I just think that's great. For him. I think I do love. I think it also, although, you know, there's family issues, he has a fantastic relationship with his sister, and I think it's something that his sister really needs because she's clearly missing having her mother around, and I think he's really sort of stepped up there, and I think it's, to me, like a family man is always going to be very like appealing, like a man that gets on with their family, I mean, most of, and like makes an effort with your family and all of that. I think so. I think you can't help but sort of smile at when you see the Tilneys together.
Yeah. Especially considering his eldest brother's like we said, you know, he's a bit of a rake, he's a bit all over the place. I just love the connection between Henry and Eleanor. That's her name, isn't it? Yeah. I just love their connection. I think that's really nice. And to see like another brother-sister relationship that's really healthy, a bit like the Darcy
and
Georgiana one. But the fact that Henry and Eleanor are of similar ages as well, it's quite nice just to see them like together, and that they've got a friendship there, and they kind of look out for each other. I just think that is really sweet. So I think that is such a great quality to have.
And Eleanor obviously loves Catherine and is like, I like her for my brother. I'm gonna I'm gonna help out here. And it's it's lovely. The scenes when it's just the three of them at Northanger, when the father's buggered off, which is nice. Are just really sweet, and you can tell they're all relaxed and happy. And because I think you always see, which even though Henry is the second son and doesn't have that responsibility, I think there is a sense that Henry feels like a disappointment to his father, which in a way, you know, because it's General Tilney and Captain Tilney, and then there's just him, you know,
clergyman.
Yeah, and I think while you kind of think, well, could he be proud of his eldest son, really, with the reputation, and he is a rake, but I think he probably is more proud of that than he is of Henry. Sort of doesn't see him as like a, I don't know, like a man, you know.
He's like established himself, in a way that he sees fit. Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that's really tough. I think that's extremely tough for a man to grow up with, like feeling like you're not. I don't know, like your path in life is not validated or appreciated by your father. Must be incredibly difficult. I mean, I don't want to go all too Star Warsy on people, but you know, similar dynamic.
I mean, but I always kind of got that sense from Henry, and again, that he definitely also misses the presence of his mother as well.
Of his mum, yeah, of course, absolutely. I'd say my only qualm with Henry is I think sometimes he can be a little too indifferent to some situations. Like, I think he could have been more clear to Catherine the dangers of her friendship with Isabella, the fact that Isabella is likely to go with his brother, because he's just like joking about it, and he's like, I think he doesn't, but he's not clear about it. And I think sometimes he underestimates Catherine, but sometimes he overestimates her life experience that she doesn't yet have, and he assumes that she'll be able to see what's going on there, but Catherine really doesn't think so. She's like, oh no, like Isabella is like might be in danger, and like why is he talking to her when she's engaged to my brother and stuff. And Henry kind of brushes it off like, oh, I can't really do anything about it, but really he should have been like, this is what's going on, friends. Like, this is not like your friend's not so great.
I think he assumed she will understand more than she does. And I suppose at the beginning as well, sort of when, you know, the friendship was forming with Isabella, and also like John Thorpe, which obviously, you know, he's a fop of a man. I suppose at that point, Henry still probably doesn't know exactly how he's feeling about Catherine, and it's like, oh, this is a really like naive girl that, you know, this is a bit of fun to chat back and forth with her. But yes, he's probably is, as you say, a little bit indifferent and not. I think if he looked back at it, he probably would have gone, I probably could have guided her a little bit more there. It would have saved a little bit of heartache, I think, on a few things.
I think it kind of links on to what you were saying, though, about like being the second son and kind of falling more into the background. Like he doesn't seem like the type that would go up to his older brother and be like, I don't like what you're doing. Like he's not that person. I feel like someone like Edmund Bertram would. Like he'd just go up to Tom and be like, I don't like what you're doing. You're being immoral. Whereas Henry doesn't seem like that type. I feel like he'd just let bygones be bygones, and he'd just like be like, I'll just do my own thing.
Kind
and
of
like my brother's an idiot.
What can I do? You know, kind of attitude.
Yeah.
Like, well, what can I do about it? Which is it is a shame. And I always forget that he is a clergyman. Like, I forget so many
He's
times.
just got a full-blown career. He's doing him.
Like, exactly. Like, in the way that I never forget that that's Edmund, what Edmund wants to do. I mean, it is a more major.
Because he doesn't shut up about it, that's why.
Yeah. But Henry, I'm like, oh yeah, he is as well.
I know. I forget also. I'm always like, is he in training or whatever? He doesn't really chat about it. But then in the book, he like disappears like every so often. He's like, I've got work now, but
I need to actually
go to work.
Do some sermons. I'll see you in a bit.
Which I actually think is so funny. It's so true. He's kind of a bit understated, isn't he? I know so many people who really love him. I don't have that same like infatuation for him. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just like he's just not very assertive, and that just like is not the one for me. Like,
I think I would want
a bit like.
I feel like I'd want to date him, but not marry him. I think that's where I am with Tilney. I feel like he'd be fun to date for a bit, but then I'd be like, nah, I think I want more of a man.
Yeah, without being like too harsh. Yeah, exactly. It's yeah, I think I'd be friends with him. I don't even think I'd date him, to be honest with you. I think he'd make a good friend though, and he'd make a good brother. In fact, he actually kind of reminds me of my younger brother a little bit.
Maybe that's why you don't want to date him.
Maybe exactly.
Oh dear. He is fun though, and I do like how much of a contrast he is to all the other heroes. I think it's nice to have.
Yes.
I mean, that whole novel is, and I think he does work well with Catherine as the heroine, just her like naivety and stuff. So I think they work well together. But like, you definitely couldn't see him with a character like Lizzie Bennet or Emma.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine with Emma? Emma would just eat him up and spit him out.
Yeah, so I think he's well matched with Catherine.
I think so. The next one on my list, though, is Edmund Bertram. So, same profession, very different character.
Yeah, sure. Edmund, sure.
We love Edmund.
Yeah. Well, okay, no, to be fair to him, like, yeah, I've never been a huge Edmund fan. I think I'm like, why have you got so obsessed by Mary Crawford? Like, take those blinkers off. Like, stop it. Like, if someone put in the comments, don't be blinded by shiny things. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much accurate for Mary Crawford. But to be fair to him, like, you know, when Fanny first comes, like, he does show her kindness when no one else is. And I think, like, that's admirable. Like, shows you, you know, you should be kind even when no one else is, and hold to your principles and your morals. Because even with Mary Crawford around, he's still pretty much, you know, even if it takes the whole elopement to make him really realise that Mary is like, she's like, oh, well, it's not a big deal. He does, on the whole, you know, hold true to what he believes in, which is an admirable quality.
Yeah, I love that he stands up for people that he loves. He is very loyal in that sense, and I think that is a really important quality, especially considering how awful everyone else is to Fanny. He just has her back, and I think that is incredible, and that's probably for me his best quality. I think it's good that he learns to recognize the importance of sharing values with his partner, because obviously he goes on a bit of a journey with that. I actually love Mary Crawford, so I'm literally just like, friend, I'm glad that she didn't end up with you, because she could do so much better. But my thing about him honestly drives me up the wall. The guy is fickle, and he's just like such a hypocrite. Like, he is all over the place. Like, he does say, oh, these are my morals, these are my opinions, but then literally crumbles on that all the time. If it's like, I get to have a hot steamy scene with Mary, he's like, yeah, okay, morals out the window. And I'm just like, friend, I don't like it. But then he's all like high and mighty about other stuff, and I'm like, I don't understand you.
Yeah, he's like, he really is like challenged essentially by Mary Crawford coming along, and I think that's so hard for Fanny to watch, and I suppose again in the way of, you also wonder how, as well as being so like blinded by Mary Crawford, you think, how is he so blind to Fanny as well? Like that takes ages.
Yeah.
You know, even Jane Austen says, you know, in the period of time that you feel is appropriate, that they, you know, at the end that they, you know, come together. He is, yeah, he definitely, I suppose, I don't know, I suppose it feels a little bit like a teenage boy that gets obsessed by something, and that's literally all he can see.
Tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think as well there's a couple of other things with Edmund that I think, one, he does have to take on responsibility that isn't his, in terms of like with his brother just being like this crazy alcoholic who gambles all the time.
Yeah.
He has to do so much more work, which is actually meant for the first son. He has to do it constantly, which is stress, you know, and a strain on your life. He gives up his like, because he was meant to be the clergyman of their parish, wasn't he? And he gives that living up to pay off Tom's debts. Like, I mean, that's quite good, isn't it? Like, he's like, I'll give up my career to save my brother and my family.
Yeah.
Which I think he is so loyal to his family, which, you know, like we said about Henry, that's a great quality to just be like, I mean, some of his family members are terrible, so I don't really get it, but they're his family.
Really hard family to be loyal to. With Tom acting the way he is, I mean, the father isn't great. He has to go on an arc as well. The mum, it just does nothing. The two sisters are a nightmare. And Mrs. Norris, oh, she's hideous. So the fact that he is still being like, well, I don't have a choice, but I still am going to, you know, protect my family and be loyal, is like, you know, I'd want to be out of there, really. Family.
I know. I'd be like, bye, I'm done. Like,
yeah.
I think, do you think Edmund's such a nature versus nurture situation? Because, like, I love that. I think the fact that he grows up with Fanny, like he chooses to spend more time with her, actually saves him. Because I feel like what we see witness with him with Mary Crawford is him giving into his natural instincts of like the rest of his family are, like his genetics.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That they're all just like these terrible people.
Yeah.
But I feel like he saves himself in the fact that he's close with Fanny, because Fanny is naturally just such a good person at heart. In that rubs off on him in the end. I think that's his saving grace. But otherwise, I think if he doesn't have Fanny, he would just be exactly the same as the rest of his family. He battles that throughout the novel, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point, actually. I think, because they do spend so much time together growing up, she's bound to have an influence, because, you know, she is very strong of character. And it is, I mean, you see that as well a little bit, like Fanny's influence on the father eventually as well. Like, it takes him a while, but by the end of the novel, he's, you know, especially when he's seen his own daughters, you know, running off and doing all sorts, he is, you know, saying, oh, well, actually Fanny's pretty great. And I think it's, just has an influence on the people around him that want to see it and want to listen, which is Edmund from very early age, and then I think eventually the father, and mother. I think. I mean, she's just on the sofa with a pug all the time.
I feel it. What an energy!
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting to see if you took Fanny out of the equation, how that would have gone with Edmund and just the rest of like the situation in that household.
Without Fanny, I think he would have just gone with Mary Crawford. I think he would have been even worse than I already find him in the book. Like, I just think he would just be just a terrible person, and really high and mighty and just like awful. Like, like I said, I really like Mary Crawford. I actually don't find so many faults in Mary. I think she actually has some great qualities, as well as, you know, she's a little bit problematic at times, but
she definitely has some good qualities, and
she's honest about that, though, which I like. I feel like Edmund's just so high and mighty that he actually doesn't even recognize his own like hypocrisy, which is quite different to Austen's other heroes. Like, often the men in Austen's novels, they are able to be like self-reflective. Yeah. Whereas I feel like sometimes Edmund's like cannot. Like, Fanny's there. She's literally just like, why are you not seeing this? We've had this conversation. He's just like, oh.
What are you doing?
Mary says some funny things at times. And he's like, Mary's like, I hate clergymen. They're all lazy. And he's like, ha ha ha. Isn't that funny? And Fanny's like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. And I think, I mean, Mary as well, she's nice to Fanny at times as well. And I think she does offer a friendship that that Fanny just doesn't have, like a female friendship that she's not had before.
Yeah, Mary doesn't need to do that. Who's Fanny to Mary? No one. In the end of the day, like, Mary doesn't know that Fanny has feelings for Edmund. Why would she? They're set up as siblings, for Christ's sake. I mean, let's be clear.
Yeah.
But then, nobody's picking up on that dynamic, okay?
No.
It's
if Edmund isn't, certainly no one else is.
No.
Where do you stand then on, it's like Henry Crawford? Because obviously, he could come along and it's like, does he go down almost hero route, or is he like down in the Wickham Willoughby side of things? Like, because obviously he goes on an arc at the end of it, not good what he does with Mariah, but like his relationship with Fanny, and like I think Fanny gets close to being like, well, Edmund's lost to Mary, so maybe I do. He's an interesting one.
I would have gone with Henry over Edmund. Edmund's not the one for me, let's be clear. And I know Henry has his flaws, but again, like many of the other heroes, Henry is self-reflective on it. He is accountable to his own failings in the past, and he's willing to change. And whether he changes or not, regardless, and obviously he doesn't end up changing, but it's just that openness to do that. It's that ability to recognize your own flaws, I think, is so important. And I just don't see that with Edmund. And I think that's problematic. And I think it'll create a dodgy power dynamic between him and Fanny as a couple, which that is not the one. At least with Mary Crawford, there wasn't the power struggle there. They were both very strong characters. They were willing, like Mary holds her own in that relationship. And so I think in terms of psychological safety within a relationship, I actually think Edmund and Mary were a better fit. I think Fanny is infatuated with Edmund, and I think Edmund has too much power in that dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, you can understand why Fanny is so infatuated, because when she was at her like rock bottom, he showed her kindness, and that continued. So, at that kind of age, it's kind of like, well, of course she was going to become a little bit like, oh my gosh,
trauma bonded.
Yeah. Well, yeah, basically. And so you kind of, in a way, can't really blame her. But yeah, that's not necessary. It's like, well, is that really the best setup for a marriage? And you kind of wonder, like, with Henry, would he have done what he did with, Mariah, if Fanny had accepted him? Obviously,
I don't think so.
Mary obviously says, well, if Fanny had just accepted him, he wouldn't have done this. And you do wonder, because he is like, he did seem to become like more seriously attached to Fanny, and like actually more genuine about his sort of feelings and everything for her. You can understand Fanny's, even taking out the kind of Edmund obsession, you can understand Fanny's hesitance, because he's obviously seen the behaviour with, like, pitting Julia and Mariah against each other. But yeah,
it's true. But he's not shy about those flaws, is he? He says, he admits that he's a terrible flirt. Mary tells everyone he's a terrible flirt. I don't think he would have gone for Mariah if Fanny had accepted him. I don't think he would have gone for it at the time that he did. I can't say for sure he would have been a changed person forever, and I think other things would have come up. But at that point, I know this sounds terrible, and I 100% advocate for marrying for love, not money, for sure. But given Fanny's upbringing, I just think even if he had gone off the rails slightly in the future, Fanny would have had a comfortable life. She would have had position. And I'm just like, based off everything that happened at Mansfield Park, I still think that would have been better than Alive with Edmund. And I know that sounds so bad, but I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just because I don't like Edmund. Like, obviously, maybe if I was in love with Edmund, I'd feel differently, but there's no love there, okay?
Yeah. No, he's always been my least favourite. So,
I want someone to be like, I love Edmund. I should get somebody on who loves him. Who is this person?
I'll do a poll on my stories to be like, who like loves Edmund if he wants to talk to
Let's find him. I must speak with you.
Yeah, I'd be like, why do you need therapy?
Is this a trauma bond? You must tell me.
Are you okay? Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
I think I agree with you with like whether Henry would be perfect forever, unlikely, but whether he would have done it so like immediately after being rejected, it did almost feel like a, oh right, well screw you, I'm gonna go and do
Rebound.
Screw Mariah. Yeah.
Screw Mariah.
Yeah. So I think it's it's always an interesting one that like the four of them.
I know. We better move on to the next person though. So the next one I have on my list, another fab one. Next one is Captain Wentworth.
Oh,
fab, but also I have problems with him as well. So I'm excited to get into this one. But we have problems.
He needs to get over himself a lot of the time. And this is another situation. Communication, people. If he just kind of like been more open and just kind of got over his like resentment, like they would have got together much sooner. Like if, you know, I think he was being a bit petty and childish. I understand, you know, being rejected and based on money and all of this, tough, horrible, but he also will have known that Anne will have been advised and influenced and persuaded. So kind of completely holding it against her, and you know, 8 years later, that's a long time. He really does just
remember
be like,
when we were teenagers and you said this horrible thing to me.
Literally, it is. And you know, I get, you know, it is that though. And then it's like, well, I'm going to flirt with this younger woman in front of you, and you know, so it's a bit like, come on, mate, you could have. Yeah, and obviously, you know, when then Louisa has her accident, he's a bit like, oh, I've been an idiot, I shouldn't have been acting like this, and it kind of dawns on him where his resentment's got him. But yeah, don't do that in life. Try not to hold crazy grudges like that, especially like with just the circumstances. I'm like, Anne can't take all the blame. Like, she was so young, of course she was gonna like have to kind of listen to the people around her. And like Lady Russell, she was trying to be a second mother and really trying to do right by Anne. Like, and in the circumstances, you know, marriage is pretty transactional and you've got to sort out your future. So you can totally see why Lady Russell was like, oh, I don't know if your mom would want you doing this. And her saying...
And he was just about to disappear in the Navy for God knows how long.
And was a nobody in the Navy at that time. So...
I know. Yes, I have thoughts. I have... Something I love about Wentworth, obviously, the fact that he is so constant in his feelings for Anne. I think that's incredible. And I think if you compare it to some of the difficulties maybe that we face in dating nowadays, the fact that we have like dating apps, this kind of endless choice, and there's almost this idea of love being kind of disposable. If there's any slight issue, there's somebody else available. And I think that's overwhelming. And like, well, I just think that notion is overwhelming for people, and even that idea itself is problematic.
Yeah, personally, like I find dating apps very intimidating. The whole idea of them, like, I'm very much like, don't know if I want to go there. Like, I think, So I know what you're saying.
It's not my cup of tea. It's not something that I've delved into myself, only because I feel like if the universe wants me to meet someone, then I will. Like, I'm not somebody who stays like choked up in my house all the time. Like, I do go out pretty regular and like, you know, doing stuff with different people and networking and things. So I I believe that we all need a few good eggs in our life. You know, I don't need to be overwhelmed with like hundreds of people that I otherwise would never have met. I feel like we will come across the right people if we're meant to. Like, do you know what I mean? We're meant to meet those people. We don't need to filter through hundreds of people to try and find them. Life was never set up that way, right? I mean, that was never meant to happen.
No, it definitely is like incredible, really, that I mean, for Anne as well, the fact that she has stayed true to him in, you know, going through in a world where women are very pressurized to marry, even though, you know, she was not the eldest daughter, but still, to secure your future, women need to marry. And the fact that she's managed to stave that off for 8 years to, you know, to get to 27, which basically, where's your cap, Anne? So yeah, it's admirable on both their parts. And I guess you can kind of look at Wentworth and think, well, hey, maybe there's always hope.
I think there's something really amazing about it. I mean, we say all of this and then he turns up and starts flirting and everyone believes he's courting basically Anne's friend, which is not the one.
No.
That's not the one. We don't need that. Something that obviously that really bothers me, the fact that he chooses to court another woman when he does still have feelings for Anne. And of all the women he chooses someone in Anne's social circle. Very problematic. That's not the one. We don't do that.
I'm just going to wave this in front of you. Like, yeah, I'm free and easy. And yeah, I'll take anyone for the asking.
Yeah, and also just like such a lack of consideration towards Louisa. And something that really bothers me about Wentworth is how judgmental he can be. There's a really awful bit later in the book when he's talking to Anne and he's basically saying like, you know, how he's always been in love with Anne and what have you, and like how he didn't realize what he was doing with Louisa, all of that jazz. But then he's also really horrible about Louisa when Benwick chooses her. He's like, Benwick could do so much better.
Yes,
like Benwick's so wonderful, and he's like, Louisa, who's she? And I'm like, friend, were you flirting and all about Louisa about 5 minutes ago? Like, this is rude.
Yeah. I'm like, well, you caused her accident as well, really. I mean, so be careful what you say. No, it is true though. I think, and I know he tries that whole like, oh well, maybe I didn't realize quite how like far I had, you know, let it go with Louisa, and maybe he didn't, and maybe the accident, you know, did bring him to his senses a bit and got a bit like, oh, should I be proposing to this woman that I basically nearly killed?
I've been caught. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, like, I'm like, oh, come on, you knew what you were doing. Like, she was absolutely besotted with you.
Yeah, and he's awful about Anne to Louisa as well. Like, he says to Louisa, like, oh, I don't like fickle characters, and the
Elliot pride,
and also like
and blah, blah.
The Elliot pride. She's so changed. I wouldn't even recognize her. I mean, the guy is a bit of a gossip, and he says some pretty bad things that are behind people's back, which I do not like. This quality. This is not nice. And even his friend, like, he's going on about Benwick, like how Benwick could have done better and blah blah blah. And it's like, this is your friend. Just be supportive of him. Like, why are you making these snap judgments? Like, he has this kind of moral superiority, which I think we do see in a few of Austen's men. In Wentworth does bother me because he almost judges other people for things like he says about Anne and her choosing not to marry when she was younger. But then he equally goes on these like moral judgments against people himself as well. And it's like, well, you need to decide. You've got a bit of pride there as well. Like, you think that Louise is no good for Benwick, and
if you're saying, you know, it's like the Elliot pride and all this, it's like, well, what about yours? I think you could put the sort of the whole, you know, insulting Anne and the Elliot to Louisa down to his resentment and like annoyance at that whole situation. But then when you then see it kind of later, where he's then being rude about Louisa and like, oh, this isn't great for Benwick and all that, it's like, oh, okay, maybe you can't fully put it down to you being a bit annoyed at Anne and her family. So yeah, he definitely has a bit of that, and I mean, maybe that, I reckon that could partly have come from, he has built himself up in society. He's doing, he's done really well in the Navy. He's made a name for himself. And I suppose, given that you were rejected for basically being a nobody, and he's come back and I'm like, look at me now. And I guess that's, that could have a little bit to do with it, even not just against the Elliots, just generally, just, he's done well in life. And I guess he's proud of that.
Yeah. I kind of love that as well. A self-made man. That is very cool. And I think that's a great lesson to learn as well, that you don't have to be given things in life. There are other paths, and you can build your own empire. Like, you don't have to be given it. Obviously, with some of the heroes, we do see that it's just, they are given it as a birthright.
Yeah.
Whereas Wentworth doesn't have that, and he does make himself. So he does have a leg to stand on in so many ways. I think he just, sometimes he can just be a bit mean.
Yeah.
I think he can just be a bit mean sometimes, and I think you're right. I think it's coming back and being like this kind of new, more popular person. Like, when you left, you were a nobody, you come back and everybody's like, oh, it's Wentworth. Everybody's interested in Wentworth.
Yeah.
So maybe that does go to his head a little bit, and he feels like he can like speak his mind. I feel like if I was Anne, it would really bother me if I heard him like talking bad about Louisa, and I'd secretly heard him talking bad about me. I'd be like, what are you going to do? You're going to go and chat to Harville and you're going to say bad stuff about me again? Like, I don't understand. Like, you said I had a fickle character, but friend, you're like this terrible gossip.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's kind of some of his behaviour that you see it could be considered a little bit childish at times. Like, it's like gossiping in the playground kind of situation. It is sad to see, but I think Anne, whatever he did, I don't think that was going to break it for her by that point. It'd been 8 years.
That's true.
So I think
that is true.
I think she would probably say, oh, well, being rude about me, I get that. I know why you're doing that. And I think she would just wash over the others.
Yeah, I feel like, oh, I didn't hear that.
No.
You'd saying horrible stuff about Louisa now.
Or,
okay.
Maybe if he continued that, she would start being like, no, don't say that. Not nice. We don't do that. Maybe she'd go Knightley on him. You never know.
Oh, that would probably be my approach. Yeah, maybe I wouldn't ditch Wentworth. I definitely wouldn't ditch him. I'd just be like, friend, can we check ourselves?
Just have to go Knightley on him. Yeah, do a Knightley.
We have to go do a Knightley on him.
Yeah.
I love that though. I'm trying to think of like, some other good lessons. I really like that Wentworth is so assertive. Like, once he is very sure that he does have feelings for Anne, he does speak his mind, and compared to some of the other heroes, he has very little to go on when he does this. It takes so much bravery for him to be so vulnerable with Anne, because they've spent very little time alone. He's obviously made some poor decisions. She's being courted by another man in this time. Like, he has very little to hold hope on, and he still puts his heart on the line anyway.
And I suppose also he sees William Elliot as hang on a minute, he's going after Anne. I need to say something now. So that is also like, he doesn't just sit back and go, oh, well, I've lost her. He's like, no, I'm going to fight for my woman, actually. So
we love that.
Yeah,
that's a great lesson.
That. And I mean, the way he professes his love, is pretty much.
I know.
Why don't men write romantic letters like that now?
Declaration of love is fantastic. We're here for it.
Not like, hey, how are you? Like,
shall we hang out?
Yeah.
Hang out? No.
Netflix and chill? No, go away.
No. That doesn't sound so great to me, no.
No, you pierce my soul. Where's this?
Yes. Tell me not that I am too late.
Exactly. The such precious feelings are gone forever. Then I'll be there. Men need to take
Where
a
is my undying love for the past decade letter? Oh,
exactly. Like, no, just pathetic text. It's not going to do it for me. Yeah.
no, we're here for the deep, passionate love. And I'm so glad that he like comes to that. I think Wentworth goes on a real journey. So I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned from him in his positive attributes, the fact that he is so consistent in love, but also the mistakes you can make sometimes when you are bottling up feelings and you know, your pride gets in the way because you're trying not to be so obvious that you have feelings for someone because you don't want to look, you know, like a crazy stalker because you like years later. So I get it. You know, there's a inner conflict that he goes through, like inner turmoil.
And again, he does acknowledge, you know, some of his flaws as well. Like, I think there are moments where he does like, okay, yeah, that wasn't so great of me to do that. So,
yeah, I agree, which I love. I love that quality. I think if you can be self-reflective, I mean, I said this is why part of me doesn't like Edmund, but I appreciate that Wentworth is honest and also that he opens up to Anne and he's like, wow, I was like resentful. I'm so sorry. Like I was just in a hole of a world for a while because I was just like angry about the whole situation. But I'm showing up now. And it's like, you know what? We can roll with that. We can roll with that.
If you can admit your mistakes and like grow from them, that is, I think, is very important as, you know, as a person, which is why I love Darcy. But hey, we'll get to him.
And we're on to Darcy. Yay! We're here with Darcy.
Oh, well, isn't he fantastic? Well, no, he is a brilliant character. I think I love him because I love how him and Lizzie go on such journeys. Like, everyone often, you know, like will say that like Darcy goes on the journey and not Lizzie, and I'm like, no, they both, to me, go on like an equal journey. He just really shows that it's important to work on yourself and that you can always improve and we can all change for the better, and that criticism isn't a bad thing.
No, yes, it's that somebody pointing out something that's wrong and you not getting so up in like your own pride and like being so triggered by it that you can't see the wood for the trees, that you can't be like, actually, yes, how do I want to show up in the world? And something that I love about Darcy is I know he goes on this whole journey, but he doesn't do it expecting anything from Elizabeth.
Oh, no.
There is no preference, no expectation of outcome with her. He changes because he wants to be the best version of himself. He wants to be somebody that's worthy of somebody like Elizabeth. Like, he doesn't do it specifically because he is like, I'm going to propose again and she's going to go for me. He's like, but I want to show up as somebody who's worthy of being loved by somebody like you and somebody who's worthy of like, and
it's the fact that even though he is still, you know, clearly, you know, loves her, and he goes off and, you know, is, you know, saves Lydia and all this, but he so doesn't want her to find out because he so doesn't want her to think that he's done it just for the sake of her. Like, he's so like, please don't tell anyone, I don't want, and he's, you know, he's quite annoyed that she's found out. And I think that really shows that he's not doing it for her. Like, he thinks there's no chance, and the only reason he comes back and proposes again is because of her rebuttal to Lady Catherine. She went, oh, hang on a minute, have I got another option here? And I think
done enough.
I think so. That is fantastic that you could make someone who, you know, you potentially might like, you know, that relationship or friendship, or, well, not friendship, relationship is kind of ended, but you're still like, she had some good points, I'm going to work on myself even if I never really see her again. Like, that's not, it's like,
wow, we love
that. And it's sort of acknowledging, it's just acknowledging when someone else is right and not being afraid of that. Even someone who, like, you can't deny he's proud, but I mean, he says himself, like, he was brought up to be proud. Like, he was, you know, from 8 and 20, whatever that quote is, I can't remember it now. There's from 8 and 20, but basically that he was said, you know, if you're a Darcy or this, you're that, you need to be. So a bit like the first line of Emma, where she, you know, Austen tells us, yeah, well, of course she's spoiled. That's her upbringing. It's a little bit like Darcy. Yeah. Well, of course he's proud. That was his upbringing and his situation in life. And him going, oh, yeah, actually, that's not so great. Maybe I could, you know, and
yes.
Yeah, I just think
I love this.
Love it. Yeah.
No, I love it. I love what he says to Elizabeth. He says, you taught me a lesson hard. You taught me a lesson hard indeed at first, but most advantageous. Yeah. By you, I was properly humbled.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just like, wow, I love that. And I mean, this whole episode is about like lessons that we learn. And we often learn lessons through the stories that we read and through character developments as well. And I think with Darcy, yes, there is absolutely something to be said about changing just because you want to show up as the best version of yourself, not because you're expecting something in return. No. Yeah. And I think that's so important. Sometimes you have to just do it for you, regardless of outcome.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as also, I suppose you can also look at Darcy's whole character and story in that sometimes, you know, people's perceptions can be wrong. I think while, yes, Darcy was proud, I do think if you look back to sort of when he first came among them in Meryton, it was literally not long after Wickham had tried to elope with Georgiana, and he is just used to going through life having women jump at him because, oh my gosh, he's got 10,000 a year. I mean, and you know,
the man's a catch.
Yeah, and he knows it, and he knows that he's got to be careful of fortune hunters, and you know, he also, I think, he wants love in a marriage because I think he saw that in his parents. You know, I think it, you know, it's sort of implied that his parents had a good relationship. So he kind of has got to guard himself and be a bit careful in society. Like if he was a Bingley the whole time, I'd be a bit of a nightmare.
So dangerous.
Yeah. So, and equally you can apply that to why he does then advise Bingley in the way that he does. So I think, you know, Lizzie is too quick to judge with that, and I think he gets a little bit of a, you know, a hard rap about all of that, when actually he's doing what he was used to doing and what he felt was necessary to kind of protect his interests. And you know, he's just been sort of all really reinforced with the fact that he's had his, you know, his nemesis Wickham come along and try and get his 16-year-old sister for her £30,000,
and then manipulates the woman that he loves as well. Like, it's bad times.
Yeah, he's like, oh, for crying out loud, you again, leave me alone. And especially, I mean,
you off ages ago.
I know, literally. And like, I mean, you can't, I think for it, with like Wickham in particular, like he was good to him. Like he has been more than good to that man in the past, like when the father died, and you know, saying, all right, I don't want the living, I'll just fine, just give me the money instead. And like he's been so good to him, and he comes along and is just messing everything up and spreading rumours and doing all this. Like,
yeah, let's be clear, Darcy's 25 as well. He's been through a hell of a lot of
28.
life.
He's 28,
issues,
was he?
Was he 28?
He's 28.
That's still young, though, right? Yes. That is still pretty young. He's been through a hell of a lot, and he's now in life.
The, like, you know, he's the big master of Pemberley and running all this, and clearly well, because all of his servants and tenants really admire him, and he's a guardian of his 16-year-old sister. Like, that must be so hard to have no mother or father around, and he's got to be both of those for your 16-year-old sister. Like, going
it's
through at that age, the things that you go through as, you know, like a young woman, and but the whole Wickham debacle, like, you know, she had her heart broken. Imagine trying to deal with that as an older brother who's trying to console your sister, but is also absolutely fuming mad with your, you know, ex-friend. Like, it's a lot.
I know. It's a lot to go through. Something that I love about Darcy, and something that I really take away from him as a character as well, is how loyal he is to the people in his life. Like, Colonel Fitzwilliam makes such a good like an emphasis on that, like how loyal he is as a friend, and we see that, like his actions were off with Bingley, but his intentions were right.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
he just wanted to look after his friends. And again, we see that his loyalty to his sister, how like he tries to keep that whole thing private, and he's there for her and he protects her. How to Wickham, even though Wickham deserves none of it. He could have just exposed Wickham, and he didn't have to like say Georgiana was involved, but he could have just been like told everyone how bad Wickham is and made sure that he had no career and everything. But he doesn't do that. He doesn't expose.
That's being loyal to his father, because he knew his father did like him.
Yes.
He was like, well, my dad did like him, so I guess but he really,
I'll be true to his words, and I'll still follow through with his, final wishes.
Son. He owes him nothing, and he owes him even less when he treats him the way that he does.
I know.
Yeah, he does so many admirable things. I think a lot of his behavior is understandable and excusable. And then when he, when he's the fact that he then changes and acknowledges and works and grows, works on himself and addresses those, is just even more sexy. But I think
it is.
I think people forget like the complexities of kind of Darcy's situation and everything that's going on, and they're like, oh, he's just so proud and haughty and all this, and I'm like, well, yes,
kind of has a right to be at the same time.
Yeah, like he is, but also there's a reason, and I think he's got a lot of walls and a lot of barriers up, and you can't really blame him.
No. Something that I learned from his kind of more flawed aspects is, and this is something that I touched on in the episode that I did with Ben, is social intelligence is really important. Like, we made such an emphasis in that episode that, social intelligence is an intelligence and it's significantly important in life. Bingley is a bit of a master at that and kind of needs to be, because he's not as established. And I think this is something that Darcy really struggles with earlier on, because he doesn't see the need to be, because he's like, this is a country ball. What do I need to? I don't need to socialize with these people. However, he sees the value in socializing with people that he wouldn't necessarily be of the same social class as when he becomes friends with the gardeners. And I think that journey where he actually recognizes there is something in forming connections with people that's really important. He has that with Bingley already, but then just seems to lack forming it with anybody else. But I think when he gets to know the gardeners better, he goes on that adjustment too. And I think something that I really take from that is the importance of social intelligence in a situation, because he's terrible. He doesn't read Elizabeth, does he? Let's be clear. Like, she's like, why are you proposing to me? And he's just encouraged to carry on.
It definitely is lacking there. I think like in like the first the Meriton ball, it's kind of like, no, talk less, smile more would have been the way to go in that situation. But like, it also, I mean, again, as well as guarding himself, people throwing it at him, he's also, as well as that lacking that social intelligence, I think he's uncomfortable. Well, he says himself, he's uncomfortable among strangers and in those situations. So that's like his worst nightmare. Like, let's go to a ball, I don't know anyone, and everyone is lower class than me, and just a very uncomfortable situation. He doesn't even necessarily really want to be there. He's got Caroline throwing herself at him as well. Like, I've just had that really rubbish summer, I don't want to be here. So I think we've all been there when we're at like a event when you're just like, oh, I really don't want to be here.
I want to go home.
I want to go
home. I had one of those recently. It's the worst.
I'm just like, oh yeah. So
it's bad. It's bad. And it's bad when you're there with friends and they're all having a good time and you're like, I can't say I want to go home because I'll ruin their night. Like, I've been there recently.
Go on, dance. She's not bad. Go dance with her. And he's just like, oh, for crying out loud, go away. No, I don't want to dance with her. She's tolerable. And then he probably like immediately was like, oh, maybe that's a bit harsh. But like, I mean, he didn't do it knowing she could hear him. Like,
true.
No, he shouldn't have said it, but I think there's a lot going on, and I think we've all been there when we just really don't want to be there.
Also, like, compared, the thing is, because obviously we have two instances. We have it with Wentworth where Anne overhears him saying like that she's like so altered or whatever on all that lot, and then we have it with Darcy where he says, she's terrible but not handsome enough to tempt me. Darcy is literally probably just like seen Elizabeth from like once, like or twice now, like just in this one room.
Yeah.
Wentworth has a history with Anne. Okay, so his is like
They
is
were
really rude.
engaged. Like,
yes, they were literally engaged. So that's really rude. Whereas for Darcy, she's technically still a stranger. So this like offhanded comment, which isn't very kind at all.
no,
but
it's
he can't know. You couldn't have
no.
planned the significance
And
later
no,
that would.
and kind of like a standard, guarded response again to like, oh, stop trying to, pair me off with these women because then they're going to throw themselves at me and I'm going to get trapped and blah blah blah. So he literally like he sort of in a way didn't mean it, like, or at least it was just oh well, she looks fine but I'm good. It wasn't personal, I think, is the way. And it's just, how he was dealing with a situation he did not want to be in. I mean,
No.
and we see him make an effort, like later, like even at the Netherfield ball. I mean, he asked Lizzie to dance and everything. Okay, his conversation skills are lacking, and it's so
that
hard.
kills me. He asks her to dance because she says that dancing's like, how people fall in love, and then he asks her to dance at the next ball. That's so sweet. That's
and then
he's just bad at reading. He's just bad at reading like people, but
and he's good at
picking up on details.
Yeah, and he's bad at like he can't do the small talk either. Like Lizzie's trying to do this, and he's like, and then she's like, "Well, it's your turn now. You're just being silent. Come on." She's like such a wit and such a conversationalist, and he's like, "Well, I'm quite awkward actually. I'm not sure, and I really like you now, so I don't know what to say." Like, it's really cute, really.
And I suppose, I mean, yeah, and that is his natural character, so I don't want to like be like, oh, that's bad characteristic, like you need to change that. But I do think there is something to be said on working on that. Like, we all have our areas that we struggle more with, and I think there is a benefit in working on those, and I appreciate in Darcy that he does. And I think in Darcy,
the whole bit with the gardeners, like that whole bit of Pemberley, it's incredible, like the way he's making, yes, he's bound to be a bit more comfortable because he's in his own setting, but he's making such, lovely conversation with them and parking back to their past, that she used to live up there, and, inviting him to fish and all of this. And like,
he picks up on those small things that is just so special. Like the fact that Mr. Garden likes to fish and he's like, oh, would you like to fish it? Like, do you know what I mean? Like he's able to build on the layers. So he has this like a very nuanced good like social intelligence. It's just he doesn't quite know how to apply it. And I think that's because he's not had to in loads of different varied society. Like he's always been used to just being probably among equals. So I think it's like learning how to communicate with other people from different worlds.
He also learns how to, I suppose, I mean, obviously it's why Lizzie intrigues him, but like he's not used to people standing up to him and disagreeing with him. He's got Lizzie that's like, no, I'm going to say that that's wrong and I don't agree with that. But whereas, all the women are going to go, oh yeah, absolutely, Mr. Darcy, I agree with everything that you say. So he's not used to that either, and it intrigues him. And I think he learns from that as well. And in his interactions with her, as well as it just being like, oh, this is quite fun. I didn't know women could be like this. I'm not used to any woman being like that.
I actually think he loves having somebody there to challenge him. We see that with Bingley as well.
The thing I'm going to say about Darcy is what we can learn from him is wet shirts are see-through when wet. Is what we can learn from him.
And we love it. We're here for it. We are here for this.
Oh dear.
So true. Yes. Oh my goodness. One of the best scenes.
I think that moment. Only one point I'm going to say about Bingley is friends aren't always right. So don't always follow the advice of your friends, even if it's well meant, because it might not, sometimes just trust yourself. I think is what.
Yes, I love this. Yeah, sometimes your own intuition is right. It's good to look to other people for advice sometimes, but don't use that as your guiding anchor in life.
No.
Trust yourself enough that you can make your own decisions. Yeah. You can do it.
You can.
Okay, next on my list is Colonel Brandon, who I have such a fond appreciation for nowadays. Colonel Brandon, really like him. I love that he shows up for people in need, a bit like Mr. Knightley. He's generous, supportive. Yeah. What lessons have you taken from Colonel Brandon?
Play the long game. He plays the long game for sure. But no, I think, I mean, he's another one that's constant. Like, he's been, I mean, that was what Marianne ends up, you know, he admires how constant he's been to his first love, even after she died. And I think, and then also supporting, you know, his ward in the way he takes that on. And like that's huge. Like, after, and just shows his sort of compassionate nature. I think it, he stays true to himself throughout the story, and as well, even though I say, okay, play the long game, but also, like, before he learns what Willoughby's done, he essentially concedes Marianne. Like, he's like, oh, this is fun, but he sees, okay, well, Marianne and Willoughby are having fun. I can see why Marianne likes Willoughby, and he's like, he doesn't try and like get in the way or cause problems, because he sort of feels like, well, that's her choice, and I get it. I'm older, I'm probably not as interesting, and he doesn't try and cause problems, I suppose. You could say he's not fighting for her. Yes, but also he's letting Marianne dictate where she wants to go. I mean, yes, it's before he finds out the really bad things that Willoughby's done. But
True. Yes, something that I love about Brandon is I feel like out of all the heroes, he shows the most like kind of unconditional love. Like all the way through, like he really doesn't actually make any action towards Marianne, because he's like, well, she makes it very clear she's not interested in like older men or men who have already had attachments once. So basically he's been written off, and he knows that.
So he's accepting
but
it.
he still
No
he
means no,
admires
and
her
all
from a
that.
distance. He wants her to be happy. And even when he finds out about Willoughby, he's not like, I'm going to go and split them up now. He doesn't even go to Marianne about it. He tells his sister, and he's like, look, I just need you to know this information about Willoughby. He's not a great guy. But
well, and even it's also he doesn't do that until, you know, it's kind of common knowledge that Willoughby's engaged to someone else. So he didn't even go and tell this when, you know, he thought they could still be together and like engaged or whatever. You know, it's once, you know, he knows for sure that that's over. He's got himself, you know, engaged to a rich woman, because essentially the secret of what has happened is out. It's at that point that he's like, I want to tell you this because maybe it will make Marianne feel a bit better. But like, you know, he is still very like aware of it, and like not actively trying to destroy their relationship or destroy her, I suppose.
I know. He's such a hero as well. Like, think of the lengths he goes to for the first woman that he loved. Like, he goes and finds her. Like, she's in like a poor house, and he like rescues her and then like nurses her. She still dies. But then he has to go through that again with Marianne, and you know, he goes and fetches her mum, and he just does not expect anything in return, but he is willing to be like such a rock in that situation. In who is he? Like, in the grand scheme of things, who's this guy? He's just this guy who knows their family. Like, it just shows such
it's loyalty as
an
well,
admiration. It's loyalty, it's unconditional love. It's really,
he's loyal to, obviously loyal to all that. But like, he says he's loyal to people that he values as friendship as well. Because obviously he helps out Edward. Like, what, he has absolutely no reason to help Edward out, and it's helping Edward out with Lucy. It's not even with Eleanor. Like, he just hears that this chap has been, you know, what he thinks of as really, you know, like hard done by his family, and says, oh, well, I can help. I'm in a position to help. So please, can you let him know that? Like, he doesn't need to do that. And
like Knightley, like, he doesn't need to be in this.
I don't even know him. Like, Wow.
I know. And like Mr. Knightley, he doesn't need to be in the spotlight about it either. He's not
he's
like,
very in the back.
I'm going to do this and I need you to tell everybody in society that I've done this so that I get all like this admiration. Everyone thinks I'm a wonderful person. He's like, I'm gonna let you tell him because I want to do a good. It's like it's an actual good deed. He's just a genuine person.
That's like, a random act of kindness is essentially what that is, because he knows that they know Edward and that they've spoken highly of him, but he doesn't know him. But he's still like, that's enough for me to be like, yeah, I've got this living, he can have it. Like,
yes, I love that.
He's good. Hey, older men are great.
Don't write off the older men.
Older men are brilliant. This is what we take from older men are good. Get yourself.
You've got life experiences. They've got 100%. Resources. They're generous with their resources. Love this.
Yeah,
we love this. I'd say my only qualm with Colonel Brandon is that he's not so assertive. Again, that kind of bothers me. I mean, I say this, but then we have Wentworth, who is assertive, and that bothered me. It was like in all the wrong ways.
I think
all the wrong ways, friend.
Yeah, I think he isn't assertive for the right reasons a lot of the time. Like with Mary Ann, because he's pretty much like, well, she's basically said no. So he's not going to be assertive because that wouldn't. You'd be like, hey, Brandon, back off. She said no. So I think he's just respectful. I think he's just a really respectful guy.
Ooh, I love that. Yeah, I think that's a great way to describe him. I think he is as well. I think there is something of just like taking a step back and letting somebody figure out their own path, and not being so intense and just like asserting yourself in their situation just because you want something from them. Like he's willing to be on the sidelines. Like you said, he'll play the long game and it's never too late for love. So he's just going to hang on in there. And he knows things will work out for him. And I love that. I actually think Brandon needs more praise than he gets. I think he's often pushed to one side by people because he is older and it's a bit like, oh, he's older, blah, blah, blah. But Knightley's older. They can't be that
Knightley's the
difference
oldest.
in age.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's the eldest.
Come on.
So let's put some love on Brandon. No. He's a good one. And I say, honestly, for me, I much prefer him to Edward Ferrars of the two in that novel.
Yeah, me too.
Ferrars.
Yeah, I'd want Brandon over Ferrars. Oh, let's move on to Ferrars him then. Let's do Edward.
Like, not as much as Bertram, but he does bother me. I think, like, you can learn things from him, like, if you're in something that's not right, have the courage to walk away, which he doesn't do. Don't commit to things too quickly, and don't keep secrets which are inevitably going to come out in the end. However, I think he's difficult. Like, I think he's a bit, I don't know, I don't like to use the word pathetic, but like
wet lettuce is my usual term.
I'm like, he has all that lovely bit with Eleanor, and I don't think Eleanor made it a secret that she was getting on really well with him and all of this. But then he doesn't have the courage to tell her then, which he should have done. He should have told her at Norland. Like, he got so close and then chickened out.
Oh God, could have saved everyone so much hassle.
Yeah. And then, yes, we've said obviously it's a lot harder for men to get out of engagements. Yes. And you can say he is loyal to Lucy and he's still loyal to her even when he's disinherited. So that is an admirable quality. But I don't know, he just doesn't do it for me. And I think, when you compare to Brandon and the things that Brandon's done, it's like, mate, nah.
Yeah. My issue with Edward is he just kind of floats through life like that. Like Brandon comes and rescues him. Like he very rarely has to take action for himself. Something that I try and see that on the positive, that I'm like, the guy's kind of anti hustle culture. And I can kind of get on board with that, slow living.
He doesn't want confrontation.
Doesn't want confrontation, just wants his chickens. But then I'm also sometimes you have to be the master of your own life. And Edward seems to really struggle with that. And this is going to sound really harsh, but I actually just don't think he has business dating. Like, that's absolutely fine if you want that, but don't bring a woman into your life then. Like, just live your own life, Edward. Have your chickens. But if you're not going to take the helm, if you're not, because women can't go and get jobs. Like, Eleanor would be reliant on him. Like, you need to show up with more action.
Is going to like wear the trousers in that relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what? In Regency England, that's not the one. I mean, people are welcome to whatever types of relationships they want, of course. But given the time period, it's not practical. It's not practical at all. It wouldn't be practical for me now, I'm very clear. But it's just not. No, you need to be able to take actions. You need to be able to lead your family, but then also he wants to be a clergyman. You've got to be able to lead society.
Yeah.
Like, these are important skill sets, Edward. You can't float through life.
I mean, what if Lucy hadn't transferred her affection to Robert?
Transferred to the other brother.
He would have just married her. And even if you take out the whole, it was hard for him, but even in like the concept of a novel where Jane Austen is made up, I still think Jane Austen even would have been like, yeah, well, he's married Lucy because he hasn't got the balls to be.
Yeah. And again, would have put Lucy in a terrible situation. Like, for all Lucy's flaws, she makes the best decision for herself, I would say. Because,
I mean, she's looking out for herself.
Yeah, which, yes, I know this. Terrible character. I have lots of issues with Lucy, let's be clear. But at the same time, like I said, women have very few opportunities back then. Lucy protects her own interests in that moment. Edward, like you said, he would have just married her.
Yeah.
He would have just married her, had no money, had no idea of how he was going to sort it out. He's lucky that Brandon comes to the rescue. I think the guy's very problematic, and I don't think he has any business dating.
Yeah, he just ends up being extremely lucky. But it's because of everyone else around him doing stuff that he ends up with Eleanor, the one he wants to be, and with a living that will do them okay. They will be okay. But it's purely because of everything that's going on around. It's not because of things he's done.
No. And I think he has a wonderful heart. I think he's a kind person. And he seems like really sweet and interesting, but I just think he kind of needs to grow a pair a little bit because, and I get that he's shy and he owns that. And I love that he's, self-reflective enough to be like, I'm a shy person. These aren't my strong suits. Being the firstborn is troubling for me. And it's like, I love that he owns all of that, but he's this is not.
When you look at like Darcy and Knightley, he's got a lot.
You've got Edward Ferrars.
And it's like, he's a firstborn too. Yeah, no wonder. Like,
he's not showing up.
No,
he's not showing up like a first. He's not even showing up like a second-born. No. He's showing up like the youngest child right now. Like, so isn't he a friend?
No wonder his sister and his mum are like, no, he will be doing great things, and no wonder they're disappointed in him. Yeah.
Well, there is that, isn't there? I just think sometimes you just can't be the victim of your own life. You need to be the. Be the hero of your own life, Edward. Sort yourself out.
You haven't got a choice. Like, he is the firstborn, so he like the firstborn. Didn't really become a clergyman, even if he wanted to. Like, that's just kind of like I'm sorry, woe with you, but like that's just not what happened. So you need to. I suppose take some responsibility.
He just really isn't taking responsibility. No, he has many. Yeah, he has many women in his life that he needs to look after, and he really does not step into that role, and that bothers me massively. He has his mother, his sister. I know his sister's married, but the grand scheme of things, he has his sister. Yeah. He wants to get married, so he's going to have a wife. How are you showing up for these women, Edward? How are you providing for these women? Like,
through Brandon, is the
answer. Again, Brandon steps up as the main man.
Saves the day. Oh man, bless him. Yeah, and I'm afraid Hugh Grant's portrayal of him did nothing for me. Dan Stevens improved his portrayal in the 2008. Hugh Grant just
the Hughes one cracks me up though. It's funny. It's funny. Like when he walks in and he sees Lucy and Eleanor and he's like
wanted to reverse out like no.
Oh man, so funny. Is there anything else you want to add about Edward?
Marry Brandon. Not
Marry Brandon.
That's my
Oh my
takeaway
goodness,
from Edward.
Eleanor, why were you holding out for this guy? You should have gone for Brandon.
I know, and Eleanor's so, like, I mean, she keeps her family together. Like, she's got a crazy sister and a mum as well. So she's keeping that all going, and then she's going to keep her own family with Edward going.
Yeah, me and Kaylee have made that point in the past. Like, Eleanor will be in a situation where she has to be the leader of their family, and I just don't think that's fair at all. I think she's dealt with enough. I think she deserves to be looked after.
She's 19.
She's young. She fell in love with this guy, but I'm sorry, this guy's not showing up with the right attitude. So,
and did
you know, he's not going to look after her.
Did she fall in love with him because it's the first guy that came along and showed her, you know, like they wouldn't have seen that many.
I think that's possible. I mean, maybe that's something we can take from Edward, you know, be yourself and women will flock, apparently, because look, he gets Lucy, then he gets Eleanor, like, be the shy guy.
Marianne's like, hell no.
Marianne's like, you're a loser.
She's like, what do you see in this man? I'm like, I get it. I need a man that's gonna like ride through the rain for me, which he does. So
when I sprain my ankle.
Yeah. You know, he does. She gets what she wants.
She does, and I love that for her. Okay, then, do you want to wrap it up there then?
Yeah, I think so.
Who do you take the most from? Is it Darcy?
Yeah.
Do you learn the most from Darcy?
Yeah, and like that's not just because he's my favorite. It's my favorite novel. I think there are just so many parts of his character and his story and his relationship with his sister. You know, all the responsibilities he's got, relationship with Bingley, and just the story goes on, and the fact that it is a character growth for himself, not for anyone else. I just think there is so much to take away from Darcy.
I love that. I think there is a lot to take from him. I think for me, it's tough between him and Knightley. I really love the way that Knightley shows up for his community, and I try and take that on board. I think we can probably both say that for ourselves, like building communities and everything. There is something for showing up for your little communities that you build, Jane Austen communities. You know, it's showing up in the best way that you can, and supporting people is massive, and being inclusive and everything. Like, and Mr. Knightley really does that, and I love that about him. They both have huge responsibilities, but unlike some of the men in Austen's, they don't shy away from that responsibility, and they deal with it, and they handle it really well. So we love that. We're here for that.
Yeah. Older men are better. It's basically the takeaway.
Give them some time. Yeah. They shall mature. Darcy, like fine wine.
Darcy,
men and wine.
Brandon, they're all better older men.
I saw a post that was like, I like my men like I like my whiskey. And it was like Scottish and old. I was like, yeah.
Love it. Oh, that's why I like my men like I like my coffee. Like, what is it? Dark. Oh, I can't remember what it is now, but there's another one to do with that as well. Like,
mature.
Yes.
I like my men like I like my cheese. Mature cheddar.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, dear. That's funny. Do you want to let everyone know where they can find you?
Yes.
I know you have balls and everything coming up, so do you want to let people know what's going on and where they can find you?
Come on over to my social channels at Laughing With Lizzie. Main one being Instagram. You can also find me on Facebook. You'll see on there I am starting to host a couple of balls throughout the year, suitable for all levels, beginners. They've been really fun so far. You need to come to one, Izzy. And you'll see all information about that and about any other events that I've got going on my social channels, or you can send me an email at laughingwithlizzie@gmail.com as well to get any information about anything. And do come say hi. I always love to hear from people. And you can just see all my Regency nonsense over on my page, which is what it mostly is.
Yay! No, I'm excited, and I will tag all the information below as always, guys. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'd love to know what lessons you've taken from Jane Austen's Heroes. Drop them in the comments section, the Q&A on Spotify, or just DM me.
And if you love Edmund Bertram, we want to know.
We must speak with you. We need to know. We need to know these reasons. You know, I'd actually be really fascinated, because if somebody's got some really good arguments of why Edmund Bertram is a great catch, I want to know about them. I want to change my perspective on this guy.
And even maybe Ferrers. I mean, we didn't paint him
Yeah,
very
we didn't
well
do him great. And I have a full episode about singing his praises. It changed, reading about proposal etiquette changed that for me. So now I might have to readdress him again and be like, friend, all the reasons I thought you were great were actually just social etiquette, and I'm disappointed in you. So
yeah.
But you can find me over on Instagram at Lottie Austen. I'd love to hear from you as well, and you'll get all updates on the podcast over there. But that is everything from us today, and we'll see you in another episode.